He thought it was just another abandoned foal. But when he opened the rusty cage to save the baby Mustang, he didn't know who was watching. Just moments later, the mother appeared. And what she did next left everyone stunned. This tale revolves around instinct, loyalty, and an unexpected revelation. A wild horse expressing gratitude for saving her child. Now watch what I'll do for you. The sun had barely crested over the ridge when Jack Monroe's old pickup truck rumbled down a dirt road that twisted through the foothills of northern Nevada. The windows were rolled down, and the air smelled like dry sagebrush and pine, a comforting scent for a man who preferred the wild to the city. Jack wasn't heading anywhere in particular that morning. That's how it always started. He called it wandering with purpose. Occasionally, the land told you where to go if you were quiet enough to listen. He'd been volunteering with a local wildlife group for the past 5 years, helping relocate deer and injured birds of prey. But what he found that day wasn't part of any call. He spotted it by accident, just past a rocky bend, tucked deep in a clearing lined with junipers. Something glinted in the sunlight. At first, he thought it was a fallen sign or maybe a trap set for coyotes. But as he stepped out of the truck and approached slowly, the shape became clearer and far more disturbing. A rusted metal cage set in the brush, crude and hand-welded, too small for comfort. Inside it, curled into a ball of dust and trembling limbs, was a baby Mustang. Jack froze, heart thudding. The foal looked no more than a week or two old, tiny, malnourished, and covered in scratches. His chestnut coat was dulled with dirt, and his legs were tucked under him like he didn't have the strength to stand. His head twitched toward the sound of Jack's boots crunching the gravel. "Hey, buddy," Jack said softly, crouching a few feet from the cage. The foal flinched but didn't cry. His dark eyes were wide with fear. Jack scanned the area. No tire tracks, no footprints, and no sign of whoever had placed the cage there. It felt wrong. No, it was wrong. "What kind of sickness?" Jack mumbled. Under his breath, he reached forward slowly, testing the cage. The door was wired shut crudely, like someone didn't plan for it to be opened easily. But he always kept tools in his truck. 15 minutes later, after carefully cutting through the wire and pulling open the heavy latch, Jack knelt by the entrance. "It's okay now," he whispered. "You're safe." The foal didn't move. Not until something stirred in the woods behind him. Jack's spine stiffened. A sound, low and steady, echoed from the trees, not the crack of a branch or the shuffle of an animal. It was a breath, controlled and deep. He turned his head slowly, and there she was, the mother. She stood maybe 30 yards away, half hidden by brush. Her powerful chestnut body poised like a statue, her black mane caught the wind, and her dark eyes locked onto Jack, blazing with wildness, fury, and desperation. Jack didn't move. The foal let out the faintest whinny, almost like a question, and that was when the mare took a step forward. Jack's heart pounded. If she charged, he wouldn't stand a chance. She was pure muscle and instinct. But she didn't run. She didn't bolt. She just stood there, trembling not with fear but with restraint. "She's been here the whole time," Jack whispered to himself, watching, waiting, too afraid to approach the cage, too wild to ask for help. And now she was watching him carefully, calculating every motion. Jack slowly stepped back from the cage and sat on a nearby log, hands open, eyes never leaving hers. "He's yours," he said quietly. The foal, after what felt like an eternity, unfolded his limbs and stumbled out of the cage on shaky legs. He stood wobbling in the sun, then let out a sharper cry. The mare answered with a whinny that made Jack's chest tighten. Then she came forward, and what she did next, Jack never would have expected. Jack didn't move. His hands were resting on his knees, fingers open, breathing slow. Eyes locked on the wild Mustang mare as she stepped into the clearing. Each hoof beat on the dry soil sent a tremor through the air, not of fear but of fierce, controlled emotion. She wasn't running toward the foal. She wasn't even making a sound now. She was watching Jack. Every step forward was deliberate and guarded, but never uncertain. The foal, Dusty, stood just outside the cage, wobbling and weak, his thin legs trembling under the weight of his body. He blinked at the sudden sunlight, ears twitching as he listened for her voice again. When she reached him, the mare exhaled slowly. Then she bent her head low and gently touched her muzzle to his shoulder. Jack couldn't help it, his eyes welled up. It was one of the most delicate gestures he'd ever seen, like she was checking to see if he was real. Dusty let out a breath and leaned into her. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of guiding the foal away, the mare turned her gaze back to Jack, not aggressive, not fearful, just steady. And then she did something that made the hair rise on the back of his neck. She took a step toward him. Jack's heart thumped. "Easy," he said softly, not sure if he was speaking to her or herself. But she wasn't charging. She wasn't warning him. She was closing the space between them, with Dusty limping behind her. Jack swallowed hard. Wild horses don't approach humans not like this, not when their foals are involved, especially not a Mustang like her, born of open land and fierce bloodlines. But she was doing it slowly and thoughtfully. And then she stopped just a few feet away. The foal leaned against her front leg, visibly exhausted. He looked up at Jack, not with fear, but with something far more innocent, trust. Jack's voice broke the silence. "You brought him to me." She didn't blink. Jack felt something deep shift in his chest. He had always believed in animal instinct, but this was something different. This was a choice. She could have taken Dusty and disappeared into the trees. She could have waited until he left, then carried her foal away. But instead, she brought him out, right to Jack's feet. The realization hit him like a punch. She didn't just follow her foal. She led him here on purpose. Dusty was dying in that cage. If Jack hadn't come along, if he hadn't opened it, and somehow she knew he would. Jack slowly stood up. His boots crunched softly on the dirt, but the mare didn't flinch. He took one small step forward, then another. She didn't move. Jack crouched, holding a hand out low, not trying to touch her, just showing her that he meant no harm. The mare sniffed once, then turned her head toward Dusty. She gently nudged him forward. Jack watched in awe as the foal, shaky but determined, limped closer and pressed his tiny muzzle into Jack's hand. Emotion welled in his throat. "I've got you," he whispered. "I've got both of you now." The mare let out a deep breath through her nostrils, almost like relief. Then, finally, she turned and looked toward the open field beyond the clearing, a silent invitation. Jack blinked. "You want me to follow?" She stepped forward, slow and graceful, Dusty close at her side. And so, he did. Not because he wanted to tame them, not because he thought he could keep them, but because they chose to trust him. And Jack Monroe wasn't about to break that trust. Jack walked behind them slowly, his steps careful and measured. He couldn't quite explain it. He wasn't leading the way. He was simply being allowed to follow. The mare, Sierra, as he had now decided to call her, moved with quiet strength, her head held high, her black mane flowing with the breeze. Dusty, the foal, limped closely at her side, his tiny hooves stumbling through the grass as the trio made their way out of the clearing and toward the valley beyond. Jack had rescued dozens of animals over the years, but was different. He wasn't helping them. They were letting him in. By the time they reached the dirt road where Jack had parked, the sun had begun to dip low in the sky. A warm orange glow spread over the hills, casting long shadows and bathing the open land in soft light. Jack glanced at Sierra. "If you intend to disappear into the wild, this is your last chance," he said softly, but she didn't move. Instead, she stopped beside the truck, turned, and stood perfectly still, waiting. He opened the passenger side of the truck bed and gently lowered the tailgate. Dusty, clearly too weak to walk much further, was shaking with exhaustion. Jack approached carefully and knelt beside him. Sierra watched his every move, her muscles tense. "I'm not taking him away," Jack whispered, reaching into his jacket for a soft towel and a canteen of water. "I just want to help." The foal collapsed onto its side in the grass. Jack wet the towel and gently wiped the dust and sweat from the young horse's coat. Dusty let out a faint sigh. Jack looked up. "I need to get him to the shelter. Shade food. He's not going to last the night like this." Sierra didn't flinch, but she didn't stop him either. So Jack did what he never thought he'd do. He lifted Dusty carefully, using both arms, and laid him softly in the truck bed, patting him with blankets he kept for rescues. The foal barely stirred. Jack turned to Sierra. "I'll take you both." He opened the side gate to the truck bed. But Sierra didn't climb in. Instead, she trotted a few feet away and stood at the edge of the gravel, eyes still locked on him. Jack read the message clearly. "I'll follow, but on my terms." So he nodded, climbed into the truck, and turned the ignition. Dusty stirred slightly in the back, his head resting on the folded towel. Jack looked into the rearview mirror, and there, she was Sierra, trotting behind him, steady and unafraid, like she had done this before. The drive back to the sanctuary took nearly 45 minutes. Jack drove slower than usual, glancing into the mirror every couple of minutes just to make sure she was still there. And every time, she was strong, silent, watching. By the time they reached the gates of the small ranch-style sanctuary Jack had helped build with other volunteers, the sky had turned a dusky pink. Lights flickered on inside the barn as Jack pulled into the drive. Dusty stirred, but didn't rise. And as Jack stepped out of the truck, Sierra came to a halt just outside the open gate. The volunteers, two women and an older rancher named Hal, came out of the barn when they saw the truck. Jack raised a hand. "Don't startle her," he warned. Hal froze when he saw Sierra. "Jack, that's a wild mare." "She followed me," Jack said. "She watched me rescue her foal. She brought him to me." One of the women, Tanya, whispered, "And now, she followed you home." Jack nodded. "She's not here by accident." Everyone fell silent as Sierra stepped through the gate on her own. No saddle, no rope, no coaxing. Just choice. Jack gently lifted Dusty from the truck bed and carried him into a small quarantine stall, lined with fresh straw, clean water, and a heat lamp. Sierra stood just outside the stall, watching, and when Jack gently laid Dusty down in the bedding, she let out a soft, low whinny, a sound filled with something almost human, relief. By morning, word had spread. It wasn't every day that a wild Mustang mare willingly followed a man back to his sanctuary, especially not after trusting him with her newborn. Jack awoke before dawn, grabbed his jacket, and headed out to the barn. His boots crunched over the frost-kissed gravel as the first light of day spilled across the valley. Sierra hadn't moved from her post all night. She had stood just outside Dusty's stall, unmoving, her body a silent guardian over her weakened foal. The hay bales stacked behind her were untouched. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't slept. She had watched. Jack approached slowly. "You don't have to keep proving yourself, girl," he said quietly. "He's safe." Sierra flicked her ears at his voice, but didn't take her eyes off the stall. Inside, Dusty slept, curled on a thick layer of straw, his breathing steadier than the day before. Jack had hand-fed him milk replacement, cleaned his wounds, and checked his temperature through the night. He wasn't out of danger yet, but he was fighting, and Sierra, she hadn't once tried to leave. She had chosen to stay, but not everyone thought that was a thing. Round noon, Jack was working on repairs to one of the broken gates when a truck rumbled down the road. He looked up as dust kicked into the air. A black SUV pulled into the gravel lot. Two men stepped out, both wearing official badges clipped to their belts. U.S. Bureau of Land Management, one of them said. "You, Jack Monroe." Jack nodded cautiously, wiping his hands on a rag. "Yeah, what's this about?" "We received a report about a wild mare being held on private property and registered, uncontained." "She's not being held," Jack replied. "She followed me voluntarily." The younger of the two agents raised an eyebrow. "Wild Mustangs don't just follow people." Jack didn't flinch. This one did. The older agent crossed his arms. "Even if she walked herself in, that animal is under federal protection. If she's unbranded, she's legally wild. That means she can't be kept on private land. She's the mother of the foal I rescued," Jack said firmly, and she hasn't left his side since. The men exchanged looks. "We'll need to see both animals." Jack nodded toward the barn. "She's right where she's been all night, but I'm telling you now, if you try to put a rope on her, things will go badly." They followed him to the barn, boots echoing across the wooden planks. Dusty lifted his head when Jack entered, eyes brighter, a soft whinny escaping his lips, and just outside the stall stood Sierra, head high, muscles taut, eyes alert. The agents froze. She's wild, one muttered. All right. They tried to take a step closer. That's when Sierra reared, not fully, just enough to send a clear message. Her front hooves struck the dirt with a thud. Her nostrils flared, and her eyes locked onto the men. She wasn't attacking. She was warning. The younger agent stepped back instinctively. Okay, a point made. She's not a threat, Jack said calmly. She's a mother, and she doesn't trust you. She shouldn't even trust you. The older agent shot back. She didn't at first, but I didn't give her a reason not to. The younger one softened slightly. So what's your plan? Jack looked through the stall window, watching Dusty rest his head on the hay. I don't have one, except to let her stay until he's strong enough to survive. And then, Jack's voice was quiet but firm. She decides. The men exchanged another glance. The older one finally sighed. You're not on record for harboring or selling. You're a licensed wildlife volunteer. We'll file a report, but for now, she stays. You keep us updated. They turned to leave. But before they reached the door, Sierra let out a deep, low nicker, soft and slow. It was not a threat. It was gratitude. And for a brief moment, even the federal agents paused, glancing back at her with something like respect. As the SUV drove away, Jack leaned on the stall door, watching Sierra settle down beside her foal, who curled against her belly like a child at home. Don't worry, he whispered. They won't take you, not while I'm breathing. The next few days passed in a strange rhythm, quiet, tender, and heavy with meaning. Sierra remained by Dusty's side without fail. She never tried to bolt, never acted out. And yet, no one dared try to touch her. Her presence commanded space, as if the wild itself had taken a single shape and refused to be tamed. Jack kept his routine simple. Feed Dusty every 3 hours, clean his stall, refill the water, and talk to Sierra like she was an old friend. She listened with those deep, knowing eyes. Now and then, the sanctuary volunteers would stop by to offer help or simply to watch. Most of them couldn't believe the scene unfolding in front of them. A wild Mustang mare voluntarily living inside a sanctuary barn. She doesn't even have a halter. Tanya said one morning she could break down that wall and leave any time. But she won't, Jack replied. She trusts you. Jack didn't answer because deep down, he was starting to feel it too. But something still nagged at him. Every time Sierra stepped into the light just right, something flashed beneath her mane. A darkened patch of hair near the base of her neck, just behind her left ear. At first, he thought it was dirt or a scar. But today, as she shifted slightly, while Dusty slept, the sunlight struck the spot again, and Jack caught a clear view. He stepped closer, slowly, carefully. Sierra raised her head, but didn't back away. She didn't ask for any of that, Jack said, standing his ground. She chose to come here, and I chose to give her sanctuary. The woman raised a folder. This says, otherwise, if you interfere with removal, you'll violate federal code. But just then, a local reporter stepped forward. Mom, are you aware this mare saved her foal by bringing him to the sanctuary? That she hasn't left his side since? Another voice chimed in. Are you planning to separate them after what they've been through? More cameras clicked, and phones recorded. The agent shifted uncomfortably. I have to obey the law, she muttered. A boy from the local school held up a hand-painted sign. Let her stay. The agent's eyes flicked from Jack to Sierra to the growing crowd. Jack stepped forward, voice steady. Look at her. Does that look like a horse asking to be relocated or a mother who found a place where she and her child are finally safe? Sierra stood beside Dusty, her head low, eyes calm. Dusty looked up at her, nudging her side gently. The woman sighed. I'll file a recommendation, temporary sanctuary status, pending review. Jack nodded slowly. We'll take it. The agents left, and so did the cameras, but Sierra stayed. Later that night, Jack sat by her stall, hand resting on Dusty's back. The foal had begun to nibble at hay again. His legs were steadier, his spirit stronger. She came to save her baby. Jack whispered, but I think she saved all of us. The following weeks unfolded like a dream that nobody wanted to wake up from. The storm had passed, not just the legal one, but the years of fear, silence, and uncertainty that Sierra had carried with her. With Dusty now strong enough to walk, eat, and even play in short bursts, Jack could finally exhale without fear that everything might collapse again. Sierra had fully claimed the small pasture beside the barn. She knew every fence line, every gate, but she never tried to leave. Not once. Not even when the gate stood wide open in the morning sun. She had made her choice, and so had Jack. He expanded the shelter with Hal's help, adding a permanent open stall structure designed just for wild rescues. But it was more than a building. It was a quiet promise: you're safe here. No ropes, no trailers, just trust. Dusty grew fast. He would stumble after the barn cats or roll in the mud until he looked more like a dog than a horse, and Sierra watched him like a sentinel, but with gentleness in her eyes that no one had seen in the wild. The sanctuary received messages, daily donations, letters, and drawings from school kids who had followed Sierra's story online. People started calling her the horse who chose a human. But Jack knew the truth was deeper than that. She had chosen forgiveness. One cool morning, Jack was in the barn stacking feed when he heard hooves behind him. He turned to see Dusty trotting inside, head high and tail swishing playfully. He paused just in front of Jack, snorting proudly. Then Sierra appeared behind him, calm, graceful, her eyes warm. Jack laughed and knelt. "Well, look who's in trouble today." Dusty nudged his shoulder and let out a soft, playful squeal. Jack looked up at Sierra. "You know he's going to outgrow both of us, right?" She blinked slowly, then stepped closer than she ever had before. Jack held his breath. She lowered her head gently, and without fear, she pressed her forehead to his chest. For a moment, the world stopped. He closed his eyes and felt the warmth of her breath, the quiet pulse of her presence. There were no words to describe what passed between them at that moment. No saddle, no command, no ownership, just two beings who had earned each other's trust. When he opened his eyes, there were tears. He whispered, "You're not just home, Sierra. You are home." Later that week, the Bureau returned, but not to take her. This time, it was a single official with a clipboard, escorted by the same young agent who had flinched when Sierra reared that first day. But now he smiled. "I pushed your paperwork through," the young agent said, handing Jack a letter. "She's officially registered under sanctuary protection. Dusty, too. You won't be hearing from us again." Jack unfolded the paper with trembling hands. Sierra, Mustang mare, 12 years old. Dusty, a foal born in the wild, is now protected under guardian status. Status, permanent residence. Carter's sanctuary. Jack didn't say a word, just nodded. As they walked back to their truck, the agent turned and looked at Sierra, who was grazing peacefully with Dusty in the pasture. "She's something else," he murmured. Jack smiled. "She's more than something. She's a miracle that decided to walk through my gate." That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold and lavender, Jack sat on the porch with a mug of coffee. Sierra and Dusty roamed the open pasture just beyond the fence, silhouetted by light. Tanya joined him with 2 mugs of cocoa. "Can you believe she stayed?" she asked softly. "I don't just believe it," Jack said, eyes still on the field. "I live by it now." They watched in silence as Dusty sprinted toward a cluster of trees. Sierra galloping just behind him, still fierce, still wild, but finally at peace. And Jack knew it wasn't just a rescue story. It wasn't just about a foal in a cage or a mother watching from the shadows. It was about what happens when a wild heart learns to trust again and, in doing so, teaches a man to do the same. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect. Would you have opened that cage? Would you have listened to what that wild mother was trying to say without words? Subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove the bond between animals and humans is deeper than we imagine. Leave a like if Sierra's journey moved you. Share this video with someone who believes in second chances, because sometimes the wild doesn't need to be tamed, it just needs to be understood.